So I've given kind of the gist, a little bit of my intention behind this class is that when I look at the screen, um, about 80% of us have been recovering from some type of a cold. So this, where this class comes from was me admitting to myself I needed a break. Like I wanted to practice yoga, like I wanted to stretch and breathe and like kind of quiet my mind, but I needed something soft. And so this kind of came from that permission of that the yoga practice can adapt to kind of however you are. I think the information that we need to have for today is that your immune system is supported by the free flowing of your lymph fluid. Okay. And so when we are sick and we stay in bed and all of that, our lymph fluid gets very stagnant. It doesn't move a lot, and it doesn't then help maybe them like push out, and these colds like really linger for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks. And so part of today is there will be some flow, there will be getting some movement into the body to help restore that the lymph, but also just like a quieting down. So I will start class with a little yoga joke, okay, if that's what we want to call it. So or maybe like I saw it as a cartoon once years ago, and so it's a picture of three monks meditating in a cave. And while they're meditating, one of the monks says, "There's like a horse runs by in front of the front of the cave, like the mouth of the cave, and is like, oh look, a horse." And about 7, 8, 9 hours later, the second monk goes, "Wow, that was a beautiful horse." And 10, 12, 13, whatever, a day later, they're meditating. And the third monk looks at them and says, "Will you two shut up and quit talking?" Okay. And so, right there is just this idea that we do not have in our modern lives much time for silence and quiet, right? I mean, my brain doesn't go 1 second without that constant dialogue. And in our daily lives with our friends, we don't cultivate silence, okay? So that's what I'm going to give little pockets of space today. They can be anywhere from 30 seconds, maybe to a minute of no talking and leaving you with your breath. Okay, so your connection did not cut out. It's just, I'm not going to be nonstop kind of verbally chatting at you today. Coming to seated in Sukhasana. So Sukhasana is clearly, it's a different pose than a Siddhasana, okay? It's just the way I'm kind of crossing my forearms, and so my hands end up around my elbows. It would be a crossing of your shin bones so that your feet end up around your knees. When I look down, right, I see that my shins and my thighs make a equilateral, like upside down triangle. And then sitting tall here, closing your eyes. So however you want to define this for yourself today, but trying to step away and remove yourself from that kind of constant dialogue. If you can remember from Tuesday's class, this energy of using the inhale to pull the breath up the front of the spine. So inhale, pull. There's like this tug from the hips to the heart up through the crown of the head. And then as you exhale, there's a pushing of the breath out through the pelvic floor that helps to ground you. 3 more together. Inhale, pull. Let the breath rise up through the mid-spine, and exhale, push. 1. Inhale, pull. Exhale, push. One more, breathe in. Breathe out. Letting your eyes float open, either taking 2 blocks and stacking your pillow on top of those 2 blocks, or if you feel flexible enough today, you can start with your pillow on the floor, crossing your forearms, bowing in, supporting the forearms on your bolster, on your pillow, supporting your forehead as you fold. Just want everyone here to check in. Can you give yourself permission today not to necessarily be going just for extreme sensation of stretch or of efforting? And I'm kind of specifically using that word, permission. It is okay. Amongst you guys who are both students, but also every one of you is a friend, I have no problem admitting that my self-worth is completely predicated on, right, being busy, being productive. And if I'm not being busy and if I'm not being productive, it hits my self-esteem, right? It's an ego kind of buster. And so it really is a practice to allow myself to do less. To say it's okay to just be here. You have about 1 more minute. And especially here at the beginning of class, really kind of opening up your ujjayi breath, that strong connection to your breath will help you to have just a more focused and clear class. Good. Inhale. Exhale, and then please roll up through your spine. Remember that idea that you kind of move the spine from the hips, change the cross of your legs, refold your forearms, and drop back in. Second side. So turning your focus away from the external distractions, right? Deciding not to engage. So for me, if I layer on both the external distractions and then my internal running dialogue, there is never any space for silence. So first, make it an active practice to turn away from the external. It's all going to be waiting for you there, the emails, the conversations, right, after practice. And start to just focus on, right, what's happening internally. You're going into your last minute here. Letting your ujjayi breath, maybe some of you let it get louder than the thoughts. An effective practice for me has never been about the length of the class. It's never been about the poses that I've done within the class. It always is this combination of breath plus focus that makes for an effective class. It can either be a 15-minute class or a 2-hour-long class. But if I have my breath and my focus, it's always a good one. Use your next inhale breath to roll up through the spine, coming to seated. Change the cross of your shins, right shin over left. Now, with your right shin over your left shin, take your pillows, take your blocks over to the left on that 45-degree angle. And then as you turn your stomach, a gentle twist. So those of you who have been sick, right? We want to start to kind of be like flushing and cleansing out the internal organs as you fold out over your left leg. Okay. So it doesn't have to be like a huge twist. It's again, kind of one of those side leaning poses where you're going to feel the stretch from that back right hip up through the right side body. That's the quadratus lumborum, feeding into the side ribs and the latimus dorsi with your arms kind of stretching up overhead here and bowing in. Okay, now an effective kind of visualization here is to imagine a balloon in your back right hip. And as you deepen your breath, you try to inflate that balloon in the back right hip. And can you imagine it kind of keeps getting bigger and bigger as it inflates up into the side body, into the side ribs? So maybe part of this practice is allowing some subtleties in, being a little bit more refined. I think as you kind of soften here, you can check in with the neck, the face. Where could you still relax and let go? Inhale. Exhale. Lift back up through center and notice the effects of that on your spine, rocking back. Change the cross of your shins. Blocks, bolsters move over to the right. And it's kind of as like smoothly and quietly as you can, you just bow over the second side. Right, now, there are definitely classes where I ask you to be like very active through the feet, active through the ankles. Right, today is not that day. Today is maybe just focusing on like a softening of the upper leg bones, a relaxing of the ankles and the feet. And if it was helpful for you, again, on this side, imagine the balloon in the back left hip. Try to inflate it with your awareness. And I remember as a beginner, actually, right, like kind of I was excited, like the idea that I could just send my awareness into a certain part of my body and it would feel like I was breathing there, even though there's obviously no lung tissue there. But that combination of breath plus awareness can start to create space. Okay, about 30 seconds here in silence. Notice the pull on your inhalation as you lengthen the spine slightly longer, and the pushing of the knees, the feet, the thigh bones, the hips down as you exhale. And then using your next inhale breath Come back up through center. Good. Roll over your shins. Tabletop position. Okay. So from tabletop, toes tuck under. And actually, a lot of you were in class last Friday when we talked about letting the movements initiate from your hips. So you are going to go into cow pose, but I noticed how much I come into cow, starting with my head, starting with my shoulders. And instead, I want you to make sure that it is actually the rotation of your pelvis over the tops of your femur bones and the soft belly that feeds into the heart. Now, with your hands planted and your knees planted, how much can you kind of embody that action of pulling the center of your chest forward? Full breath there. And then on your exhale, push your hips up and back. Still with that very strong awareness that, right, the pelvis did not rotate backwards, that it's still tipping forward. Take your knees down to the mat, tabletop. Okay. So my arms and my upper thigh bones are the pillars. I focus on the muscles buried deep within the hips to be able to rotate the pelvis. Let that feed the spine as it softens the heart. Use an inhale breath. Pull the hands, pull the elbows, pull the shoulders back as the heart drives through, and then push forward through the hands, arms up overhead as you stretch up and back into a downward facing dog. Okay, one more time. Knees drop down. See if you can get that feeling, encompass it all together here. Rotating through the hips, pulling the spine long, opening up your breath, and then there's that active push up and back. Seeing if you can keep your sitting bones as really the peak of this practice. Walk your hands back towards your feet at the back of your mats. Good. Hi, Jill. How are you? Bend your knees. And then bring the backs of your hands onto the floor so that your palms are turning up. By putting the backs of your hands on the floor, it's going to kind of prevent you from doing even more work. Let your head hang. And then with your awareness on the bones of your pelvis, soften the knees and start from your tailbone and begin to roll up through your spine. So it's not a lifting of the head. It's not a lifting of the shoulders. It's a positioning of the pelvis that allows your low back, your mid back, your upper back, your shoulders, neck and head to lift to stand. 2 big steps, top of your sticky mat. Good. Inhale, full stretch, arms up, reach. Soften your knees, move the pelvis to let the spine follow and fold in here. Inhale, lengthen, look forward, half flat back. Step your left foot deeply back into a lunge. Okay, now if you have 2 blocks, it can be nice to prop yourself up on the 2 blocks so you don't feel that you're sinking, right? Because again, however the position of your hips are is how your spine is going to feed, right? So I want to feel that like my pelvis is lifting up, my spine is long. And then can you start to do in your hips a few little rounds of your own cat-cows? So that movement in the hips. So everything actually, the legs stay stable, the spine stays stable, and you're just trying to articulate that work into the hips. And as you do that, that left knee or left foot should actually start to wiggle slightly deeper back. Now, push back through your left heel as you pull forward through your right knee, right? That left heel is pushing back and the right knee is pulling forward. Drop your back left knee, let the hips hang there, and then lift your chest. Okay, so that in and out, that sawing action, that rocking of your pelvis, that's to loosen up the lymph fluid to support the nervous system or support the immune system. Push into the back foot, push into the front foot, and let the inhale breath pull and float your heart up. Good. Remove the blocks. Press back, downward facing dog. Okay, and so couple breaths on your own in silence, right? Think about those monks and how if you're just meditating for hours on end, right? Any noise, even if it's 10 hours apart, is distracting. So just get quiet here. Walk your hands back towards your feet, back of your mat. Good, generous bend to your knees. Flip your palms, drop the head, hang the arms, kind of like wet noodle ragdoll with your arms, with your spine, as it just hangs. And then don't be overly concerned about like the muscular work. I want you to think about moving the bones. So you soften your knees, and then starting from your tailbone, start to rotate the pelvis to feed the spine. Low back, mid back, upper back. Very nice, Julie. Good. Head stays heavy as you roll into rise. 1, 2 steps to the top of your mat, and inhale, reach. Bend the knees. I focus on the hips rotating and let that drop the spine. Uttanasana, forward fold. Inhale to lengthen, half flat back, and step your right foot all the way to the back of your mat here, lunging. Okay, so I am up a little bit higher, right? If you don't have blocks, maybe you could be on fingertips, because that gives me the space to cat-cow through my pelvis. So what you guys will notice is that my legs aren't really moving, right? It's actually focused more down into the pelvis. And then if you can kind of do that sawing action back and forth, do you feel that actually your right leg can get a little bit longer? Wiggle the right leg back, pull the spine long, and then here we go. Push back into your right heel as you pull forward through your left knee or left shin. Try it again. Push back. Does that help your right leg get longer and straighter? And then left shin bone is pulling forward. One more time. Push back. Keep it back. That's your anchor as you pull that left femur bone forward, and then drop that back right knee. I push my right toes, I push my right kneecap and the left foot down into the mat, and then I use my inhale breath to pull the spine tall. Good. Plant your hands. Downward facing dog. Can you stay there in stillness and quietness? Maybe closing your eyes, like withdrawing your senses from all the external distractions. Hands walk to the back of your mat. Flip the palm. Challenging yourself here to let your upper body, your neck, your head, your arms actually get heavier. Surrendering that weight over your legs. And then this is also where I like to think of like my brain kind of peeling away from the sides of the skull, where it's like overcrowded with noise and conversation and that running dialogue. It's like the brain just kind of shrinks, it gets quieter. Soften your knees, roll up through your spine. So that's an articulation as you stack your bones. And 1, 2, step to the top of your mat. Inhale, reach up. And as you pull the arms up, you're pushing your heels down into the mat. Bend your knees, interlace the fingers back behind you to stretch your shoulders. Okay, so you have a lot of lymph nodes around your armpits here. And so we kind of want to rotate the shoulders. We want to squeeze into the armpit area. That's really important for supporting your immune system and helping us kind of like knock out these colds. Inhale, exhale, release. Looking forward, half flat back. Step your left leg deeply back into the lunge. Okay, again, I'm gonna come up onto my blocks since I have them. Back left knee down, and then walk your blocks back, straightening your front right leg. Okay, so that's your Ardha Hanuman. And now, cat cows, right? So cat pose is tucking the pelvis under. Move from the hips, everybody. So it's easy to move the head. I want you to really control back and forth here, rotating the pelvis forward and rotating it back. Okay, so when I rotate the pelvis forward, I feel the stretch on the right hamstring like a rubber band pulling. And then when I tuck my tailbone under, I feel there's some slack at the back of the leg. Do a couple more, right? And see if you can let your tailbone fly up. And then the other thing that you should notice is when you go into a cow pose, right? Anterior tilt of the pelvis, the right heel should get heavier in the floor. Now, once your pelvis is rotated as far forward as you can make it, don't focus on putting the head down. Can you try to do your forward fold, trying to connect your stomach, your belly, your chest, and your chin, folding out over that front leg, right? So it's like this really genuine sensation of the spine kind of stacking on itself, not just rotating the hips and then dropping the head. Pull forward and long on your inhale. Push back through the hips as you exhale. One more, breathe in. Breathe out, inhale, lengthen, half flat back. Bend the knee, plant the palms, downward facing dog. Close your eyes. So a lot of you know closing your eyes as pratyahara, right? Pratyahara means to withdraw your senses. To quit looking around for the distractions in the room. And that's why we have our breath loud. So you're not listening to other things, you're listening to your breath, helping you to draw inwards. Walk your hands to the back of your mat. Softly bend your knees. Flip the palms. Drop the head. Maybe closing your eyes here. You guys know I always say I think of this as almost like a child's pose. Kind of resting my rib cage on my thighs, but still actively pushing into the feet. Inviting some quietness, some space between the thoughts. Roll up through your spine. Okay, so some days it's nice not to be quite so linear. 1, 2 steps to the top of your mat. Inhale, flow with your breath. Pull up, pull the ribs, pull the shoulders, pull the gaze up as you push through the feet, and then exhale, fold in, interlace your hands behind your hips, and again, squeeze around the armpit area. Inhale. Exhale. Can you find that rhythm that the inhale breath actually pulls the ribs forward and down? The exhale breath actually helps to push and sink you back into your heels. Good, release, lengthen, look forward, half flat back. I'm going to use my double blocks as I step my right foot deeply to the back of the mat. Good, back right knee down, walk it back as you straighten your front left leg. Okay, so one more time. Right, so this will be like the end of this kind of cat-cow action. Okay, I think it's wonderful what it's doing for the hamstrings, but there's something much more subtle, right? There's a ton of lymph nodes up in your groin area, right? And we want to keep a flow there. Feel the pull, like tugging on a rubber band, and the softening, and the more control you get there, you get unstuck, you get fluid through the pelvis, and everybody then go into your strongest version of anterior tilt. You can feel like a little channel in the low back, and then you focus on trying to bring the belly, right? So my low back is long. Then I work to take the chest forward. My mid back is pulling forward. And then the chin towards the shin. So everything like kind of like water is pouring down that front leg. Good. Left heel is heavy in the mat. And then leaving you there for a few breaths in silence here. Now, are you one of those people that as soon as I leave you in silence, you just start judging the pose, or you start negotiating with yourself? How about just being there, practicing stillness and silence? Not having that constant running commentary. Lift the gaze, look forward, plant the palms, press back, downward facing dog. 3 breaths in silence. So did you kind of ever think about, right, the fact that you're just talking to yourself, telling yourself things that you already know? Right? So it's kind of like, what's the point of just like repeating and repeating? Stepping out of that kind of cycle. Look forward, step your right foot forward up in between your hands, lunge. Lower your back, left knee down. I will use the double blocks as we come up. Flex, extend the front right leg. And I know at least one of you has a tight IT band. So last stretch, right foot comes across the mat, right? So I'm bringing it over to the left side. I'm trying to keep my right toes up, my right kneecap. Now I'm squeezing the inner thighs, and it will be up to you. I'm going to go face down, flat on my blocks, and then walk my hands at a 45-degree angle off to the right. And so what this should do is it should kind of be a combination of everything we've done so far. When we started seated, you got to stretch through the back of the hips. We worked a little bit of that side body, and now you're using your hamstrings and allowing you to get more into the IT band, the outside edge of that right leg, outside edge of the outer right knee. Yeah, and maybe dropping the head. Squeeze the inner thighs. And then most of you guys know that, like, I like to use my hands on the blocks or on the floor quite actively. So I use my hands pushing down, right, to explore that ability to pull the spine long. Good. Walk your hands back underneath your shoulders as you shift back, downward facing dog. Shake out your head. Close your eyes. 3 breaths. Left foot steps forward up in between your hands. Good. Back knee down, grab your double blocks, pull it up and back. Okay. Left foot slides over whenever we cross that midline. That's what allows you to get into the IT band. I squeeze the inner thighs, walk my blocks over to the left, or just your hands, that's fine. Face down, keep the hips where they are, and then pull the spine long here. So maybe some of us, we just have to finally surrender the thoughts, right? Like, know that they're not helping. They're just keeping us in this loop that then is causing us to feel like we're burned out. Right? But your mind, that chatter is attached to your ego, and your ego does not want to be silenced. And so it's a really, really active practice from like your higher self to say, I'm not going to keep continually getting pulled into that conversation. I'm going to kind of rise above it with the power of the breath, reaching out to the left. Use the hands actively into the floor. Good. And then please come back to center. Shift that weight forward as you plant your palms. Downward facing dog. Okay. Knees to the mat, tabletop. You are either going to take your bolster or pillow across the top of your mat and plant your hands right in front of it. And so what this is going to do is it's going to keep your forearms from sinking down, right? It's creating a lift. If you don't have a nice fluffy pillow, you could always put your hands over blocks and then rotating through your hips, downward facing dog. It is going to limit you. It is not going to let you go quite as deep into your shoulders as you usually do. But it's going to give you this feeling that the arm bones, the upper arm bones are lifting up towards the ceiling and that the chest is dropping through, stretching open the armpits a little bit more here. And it's all about proportions. Some of you, depending on the size of your bolster, you might be able to drop your head onto the bolster, supporting it there. Others of us, we just got a couple more seconds here, letting the head hang. Inhale. Exhale. Good. Knees down to the mat. Big toes come together to touch. Okay. Take your pillow. Didem, you're lucky. You have a nice one. So take your pillow, wedge it right into the tops of your thighs against your stomach. So it pushes, that it actually creates some pressure into your internal organs, and then bow and fold forward, coming into a child's pose. I always like this version. I can kind of even sometimes feel my like heartbeat like throbbing down in the organs. But it should give you a little bit more space as you stretch and round your low back here. And then imagine the balloons in the back of the hips here. Trying to inflate them and really imagining that the back body is kind of like a weighted blanket, heavy down on the front body. And the front body is just melting, kind of wrapping around the pillow as you fold. "30 seconds. Silence. And so before you move, I just want you to kind of evaluate, how do you do with that silence? What comes up? Is it boredom? Is it resistance? Do you love it? Does it feel peaceful and calming? Right? Some people have this kind of like bubbling up of just fear, very uncomfortable when it's quiet. And then lift back up to center. Tabletop position. Okay, so when I'm doing a practice like this, you do want something that's going to take you upside down. Now, if you have a headstand practice, right, I'm going to invite you to come up into headstand. I know it's quite active, right? And we're going to be there for about a minute to a minute and a half. Forearms down, elbows underneath your shoulders. Okay, And I'm not going to overly teach it today because I assume if you have a headstand practice, you know how to get up. If you do not have a headstand practice, from a down dog, your right foot will step forward. You'll pivot to the left side of your mat, and then you're going to use your bolsters and your blocks to support your head as you stretch your arms up and over. So energetically, it's still giving you a lot of the benefits, right, of that headstand practice. You're supporting your head, right? And the other thing is so I was doing this class by myself this morning, and I can do a headstand, and I said, I don't feel like it. I do not feel like putting even that much effort into my practice today. So, yep. And then Jill, when you get into it, yeah, try to stay into the poses, right? Like, one of my big things is starting to recognize in your own practice the difference between fidgeting for distraction and moving to deepen the pose, right? And so I consider fidgeting at the beginning of a pose, right? I think it's a good thing because you're adjusting, you're settling in. But then at some point, we all just kind of have to kind of surrender or accept, like, all right, this is where I am today. I'm going to now practice stillness and silence 1 minute. Wherever you are, find the relationship of the push-pull, the pulling of the legs or the hips up, the pushing of the head, the hands into the mat. If you are up, slowly start to come down. If you're in fan pose, stay low as you pivot, turn to the top of your mat, and then everybody meets in one last child's pose. Rolling up through your spine, shifting your legs forward. Okay, so I'm making an executive decision. We're actually not all going to move to the walls, right? Since most of you have blocks and have a pillow, right? You're going to take your double blocks. You always lie down first, okay? And then stack the blocks underneath your hips as you lift them up. And you're going to find that sweet spot of your sacrum, like this flat bone right at the base of your spine. And then spinning your shoulder blades onto your upper back. And if you don't have blocks, you can do all of this with a pillow, right? Anything to get the hips elevated and to let the energy kind of that was like pulled in the pelvis to start to like flow down towards the heart. And then I take one leg up first and kind of adjust my blocks again. And then I take the second leg up and come into like a supported shoulder stance. If this is not comfortable for you, you could do legs up the wall. I just didn't want to ask you guys to have to move around a lot. Now, I would like you to be able to experience this feeling of kind of like the blood, the energy draining out of the legs. That starts to also be like that movement of the lymph. So when I'm sick, when I can't sleep, when I'm under stressful kind of like mental chatter, right? Legs up the wall tends to be very calming and grounding on your nervous system. And then also you have a lot of, right, the lymph up around the neck and around the throat. Flushing that out. Spending some time in silence. That was 1 minute of no talking. Checking in, how does that make you feel? Did you start scanning the body and looking for pockets of tension? Mine tend to be around the root of my tongue, the base of the throat, the tops of the shoulders. You ever spent some time around like a quiet, contemplative, reflective person? Right? You can feel how that energy can be really calming and grounding. So it can be really nice to practice this for yourself. Now, for this last minute, you guys, if you'd like to take your legs out into a wide V so that you get a nice stretch through the inner thighs and like a softening of the belly. And what you'll feel is hopefully where your blocks are, it also supports a little bit of that lumbar curve and that lifting of the heart. Can you pull the energy out through the legs towards the tips of your toes? Inhale. Exhale, and then scissoring your legs back together to the midline. I like to bend one knee, support myself as I touch the floor, bend the other knee, landing in that supported bridge pose. Just pause there with a soft belly, open heart. Inhale. Exhale. Pelvis lifts up. Remove the blocks and roll to come up to find seated. Noticing as we slow down, if your mind gets quieter and quieter. Okay. So this is going to be our last one. I'm going to go facing the long edge side of my mat just because I think it's easier for you all to see. I'm going to take both blocks completely lateral to the left side of my hip and stack my pillow on top. Okay, good. Then I'm going to swing my shin bones off to the right so that both thighs are now parallel to the top of my mat. And I'm going to reposition my blocks so that as I frame the hands, one hand on the left side, one hand on the right side, I can actively push and twist and then kind of wedge those blocks, wedge the pillow right into your core, turn through your ribs And then slowly begin to lower yourself down, come into this very mild, very gentle supporting twist. If it's too much on your neck, just look in the direction of your knees. I am definitely guilty of being the type of practitioner that if it's not extreme, it's almost like if the stretch doesn't hurt, I always felt like I wasn't doing it enough. Where I definitely have a new understanding. It's actually when I'm more gentle, when I'm calmer, and I give the body permission to slowly open. I think we all say that we want our yoga practice to like rejuvenate us, to restore us. Right? But do we really practice that way? I noticed for myself yesterday that actually what brought me to yoga in the first place, that feeling of equanimity and calmness, also becomes some of the reasons sometimes why I resist practicing, because being quiet, being still is also challenging, not easy. Take your time pressing up to seated. And I do like to pause for just a moment and see that even though it was super mild, that it did create some sensation through the spine, through the ribs. I'm going to pick up that structure, just move it to the back end of my mat over my right hip, unfold my legs, swinging them to the left. Check to make sure that my thighs are kind of running parallel to one another. And then I first frame, and you use your hands actively to turn and look out over the back shoulder, and then let the pillow press and squeeze into your internal organs, supporting the movement of that lymph there. No worries about the neck, you guys, if you just want to look in the same direction of your knees. When I look at this group, like I know you're a bunch of kind of like powerful, active women getting like a lot of stuff done over the course of the day. Right? But do you ever kind of question like how you're refilling your well? Like, right, like how are you really nurturing and taking care of yourself? I bet each one of you, if your friends were sick, you would say like, oh, take care of yourself, like go take a rest, take a nice restorative class. How often do you really apply that to yourself? Last minute here, and so especially if you've had kind of like a hot button topic on your mind and stuff, Maybe experiencing that, even just taking this 1 hour away from it can create a little bit of space and maybe some new reflection, not just caught up in the same circles about it over and over again. Okay, and this should leave you in a fairly good position to be able to press up. And then as you rotate, knees up towards the ceiling, that brings your structure, right, of your bolster and your pillow right to your low back as you extend out for a supported Shavasana. Okay, and yep, if you have to move things around, absolutely. If you have to clear out the flesh of your buttocks or move your pillow at all, that's fine. Chin drops down into the chest, making sure that the back of your neck is long. Closing your eyes. Kind of everything here today was supported either by 2 blocks, supported by the pillow. And especially if you're coming out of being sick or something, it's okay to say like, I need some help. I need some support to get back up to kind of like my full power. And then I'm watching the time. We won't be late. 1 minute, stillness and quietness. Okay. Pull the breath up into the center of the chest. Exhale, push it out through the pelvic floor, out through the legs. As you wiggle your fingers and toes. Okay, so there is kind of, right, you want to wiggle fingers, you want to wiggle toes, you want to bend your knees. And you don't want to throw like all your energy like back up into the thinking frontal cortex. You kind of want to keep it in the back of the deeper parts of the brain, so you don't engage, right? The frontal cortex is where all like that thinking and analyzing is doing. So I think when I sit straight up, it's like I'm throwing all my thoughts right back up into the mind, whereas like Shavasana is supposed to kind of like pull them back and empty out here. Okay, and then joining your hands in front of your heart center. So whether you're recovering from being sick or just kind of in general, right? Sometimes giving yourself permission to slow down. Taking your thumbs to your third eye as you bow forward to seal your practice. Jai, Siddhatsma.